Samantha Krebs and Joey Carnot were in love. They had been in a committed relationship with each other for quite some time, and shortly before the night in question, they had actually gotten engaged. But like any relationship, theirs had problems. There were issues that existed. And some of those issues involved mental health. Mental health concerns about Joey. He had some diagnoses and he was supposed to be taking medications, but wasn't always doing so. Some of the issues also involved use of controlled substances, quite frankly, by both parties. And throughout this trial, I anticipate that you're going to hear information about Samantha, about Joey, and about some of the other individuals involved in the case, that they're not perfect people. They have addiction issues, and that's something that they've all struggled with for quite some time. And you heard Attorney Templis tell you that you'll hear how Samantha was actually on supervision. And at this time, she had a probation agent that she was supposed to report to. And these are all things that are going on in her life and in the life of Joey. And one additional stressor that was occurring is that Joey was in a custody battle. He was fighting for some custody to be able to see the son that he had with another woman. And Sam was a part of that. She knew Joey's son, and she wanted him to be a part of Joey's life as well. She wanted them to be a family. They really did love each other. But on this night, on July 18th of 2024, the two of them were at the home that they shared together. And they were having a normal night for a period of time, and then kind of out of nowhere, something changed. Joey had told Samantha that he was going to meet up with his uncle, and Samantha had concerns about that. She had concerns about some of the activity that would take place if Joey did that, and you'll hear how she told him, you might not want to do that, that's not a good idea. And that conversation really flipped something for Joey, and an argument ensued. You'll hear how Samantha had told Joey that she was going to leave. And when she's doing that, you'll hear how she's sitting in the living room, which is semi-blocked off from the kitchen area, which is where Joey is. And Samantha's sitting on the couch getting her shoes on, and all of a sudden she sees something fly across the living room. And it's a sheath. It's a sheath to a knife set that the couple had just purchased, a brand new knife set. They had recently opened them and had put them away in their kitchen, and this was an object that Joey apparently had. And Samantha, you'll hear, is still getting ready to leave the apartment that night. And all of a sudden she looks up and she sees Joey coming out of the kitchen area, and he's holding on to his side. You'll hear, realizes kind of what's happened. She doesn't know the severity of it, but she goes to Joey. She's concerned. She gets him on the ground. She grabs paper towel out from underneath her sink and she's compressing his wound. Now, prior to this, earlier in the night when things were still good, Samantha had invited over her friend, John Pfeffer. And John Pfeffer that evening was with his maybe then girlfriend. I'm quite frankly not sure what you'll hear in that regard, but he was with his maybe then girlfriend, Christy Cleland. And so the two of them decide that they'll come.
You have to slow down.
Absolutely. The two of them decide that they will come over to Samantha's house that night to hang out with both her and Joey. Now, they live a distance away, and so by the time that they make these arrangements to come over to Samantha's house, that's when the dynamic within the apartment is changing. By the time Samantha is on the ground with Joey, compressing the wound, she hears the buzzer, and she gets up to go and let in John Pfeffer and Christy Cleland. She knows that they were coming over to the apartment. She was expecting them. And so she buzzes them in, and she goes back to Joey. And the recording that Attorney Templis had talked about picks up that first interaction of when John Pfeffer and Christy Cleland walk into the apartment. And nowhere on that initial recording, within the first seconds of when John Pfeffer walks in the door, do you hear Samantha say to him, "Tell the cops he stabbed himself." Now, Attorney Templis read to you what she believes that recording says, but you'll get to hear a copy of it for yourself. And you'll get to determine what was actually said during those couple of minutes that were actually recorded. But I want to highlight that Attorney Templis had talked a lot about how the truth never changes. And quite frankly, you're going to hear a lot of different versions of this truth coming from John Pfeffer's mouth. He never tells a consistent story about what happened. And something that you're not going to hear, or I anticipate that you won't hear anything about during the course of this trial, is Samantha asking John Pfeffer to cover for her. What is told to the police initially and later on is all done at the hands of John Pfeffer. You won't hear anything about Samantha being involved in any type of plan to cover up what might have happened that night. You're not going to hear any evidence of that sort. So we go back to that evening. We have Sam over Joey holding onto his wound, and John Pfeffer and Christy Cleland walk in. There's this recording that takes place. But again, you'll hear how Samantha was on supervision at this time. And I also anticipate you'll hear how there were items in that apartment that shouldn't have been there. And John Pfeffer was aware of that. And you'll hear on a recording that he tells Samantha that she should leave.
All right, so obviously the defense telling a very different story than the state, and in fact, it's one of the friends that complicates things. Seems like he told a couple of different stories to the police. We're going to pause it right there for a quick break. Now, coming up, the defense is going to assert that the death of Joey was actually an accidental suicide, not something that Samantha Krebs participated in. The finale of the defense's opening statements right after this break. Keep it here on your front row seat to justice.
Tonight on Closing Arguments, diving deeper into today's defense case, testimony in the trial of Donna Adelson. Catch up on everything you may have missed as our experts weigh in.
Closing Arguments with Vinny Politan, tonight at 8, 7 Central, only on Court TV.
Saturday nights on ION
is our night.
Let's go! Double headers every Saturday at 7 and 10 p.m. Eastern. The new Saturday Night Out is on ION all season long.
Welcome back, folks. We're in Wisconsin now, watching opening statements in the kiss and kill murder trial of Samantha Krebs. I want to take you back into court now for the final part of the defense's opening statement.
Pfeffer doesn't call 911 for quite some time, several minutes. When he does call 911, the responders eventually arrive to the residence, and when they get there, they locate Joey on the floor, and they also find Christy Cleland and John Pfeffer. And both Christy and John are talked to by detectives on scene. They're taken outside of the apartment, and that's where they give their first statements. And again, these are statements that continuously change each time they are talked to by law enforcement. So the original statement that Samantha wasn't at the apartment that night comes from John Pfeffer. He tells police he has no idea where she is, that he thinks that she had been at a friend's house, and she was going to come back to the apartment to meet him there. At some point, while law enforcement is still on scene and John Pfeffer and Christy Cleland are outside with them, John calls Samantha, or Samantha calls him. There's a call that takes place. And this is the call that Attorney Templis referenced, where Officer Felmer ends up talking to Samantha. But prior to Samantha being on the phone with Officer Felmer, you'll hear what John is telling to her. And he's laying the groundwork, letting her know essentially what he's already told police so that her story is what he's told them. And he tells her, we got here, we found Joey on the ground, there's bleeding. And he tells her, you're going to be the #1 suspect. You're the fiance. Fiancés are always the #1 suspect. And so that conversation occurs before Officer Felmer gets on the phone line with Samantha. Attorney Templis has addressed a lot of what you will hear in terms, or a lot of what she believes you'll hear in terms of what Samantha's demeanor was like following this incident. But we've already talked about in jury selection how everybody responds to things differently. There's no right way, and there's no one way to respond. And so you will see different actions and different statements that Samantha had made regarding this evening in the days that followed it. They're asking you to pay attention to evidence that you'll see about Samantha hanging out at her friend's house in the days afterwards. about her driving away from the scene in a vehicle that had stickers on it at one point. But again, what you're not going to hear throughout the duration of this trial is that Samantha asked anybody to cover for her. You're going to hear that she is essentially trying to cope with something very tragic that she just witnessed. It was the tragic death of her fiance. Again, somebody that she was in love with and was planning on spending the rest of her life with. Samantha went to that friend's house, Jeff Hayes' house, and again, she stayed there until she was going to be able to report to her probation agent. She was trying to do what she thought was best, and she was essentially relying on advice from people that she thought were her friends. We've talked a lot now in opening statements. It's really a roadmap for what the attorneys expect that you will hear throughout the duration of the trial. Some wise man that I work with always explains opening statements as a bookend. So first we tell you what we think you're going to hear, then you hear it for yourselves, and then at the end of the case, in closing arguments, we come back up here again and tell you what you just heard. But again, just flipping to some of the things that I want you, or I'm asking you to pay attention to, things that I don't think you will hear anything about. You're not going to hear anything about text messages or phone calls between Jeffrey Hayes and John Pfeffer, where the two of them are planning some conspiracy to cover up for anything that Samantha might have done. Now, there are phone calls that occur and a text message saying 911, this is an emergency that happened that night, but there's no response to them, no immediate response, and there's no other further follow-up conversations between the two. There's no, Attorney Templis has said that the truth never changes, but the fact of the matter is that you're not going to hear any consistent truth. So really no truth, because there's no consistent version of anything that John Pfeffer says happened. You're not going to hear anything about there being some type of physical altercation on the night of July 18th, 2024 between Samantha and Joey. In fact, you're really not going to hear about any physical arguments happening between the two in the past at all. You're not going to hear about any defensive wounds that Joey would have had to his body. There's just one single stab mark. You're not going to hear any testimony again about Samantha asking anybody to cover up for her. You're not going to hear that Samantha would have had any motive to harm Joey in any way. You're not going to hear anything that would lend you, or I think find you to believe that Samantha would have had any intention of harming Joey in any way. None of that exists here. Attorney Templis got up here and she said that your job as jurors, and I agree, is to find the truth. And the fact of the matter is that the truth in this case is that there was no homicide. What happened to Joey Carnot was, quite frankly, a tragic accident. It was suicide. And whether it was accidental or intentional, it is not something that Samantha participated in. The truth is that Samantha did not kill him. She did not harm him. And when I get back up here at the end of this case and closing arguments, I will find or ask you to agree with me on that. I will ask you to find Samantha not guilty. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, counsel.